Hello and welcome to the West Ham Breakdown with me, Jack Alderton, and my mate Callum Goodall in a week where West Ham drew 1-1 away at Goodison Park against Everton. Cal, we were terrified ahead of this game. There were so many things that could go wrong. There were so many things that could go right. And many ways I'm not massively surprised that the outcome we got is a whole bunch of nothing. What did you make of the game?
Yeah, I think that's it. That was it. It could have gone really right. It could have gone really wrong, and neither of those happened. So it just kind of was meh. Which is going to make for a really good podcast. So definitely stick around and stay for the full 45 minutes. No, of course it's going to be it will be a good one because there is a lot to break down. But yeah, in terms of a game, not the most thrilling of spectacles, but as you say, to be expected based on where we're at the minute with Potter and what we're trying to fix, and also what we know of Moyes. But yeah, I think positive was that we looked all right in terms of not letting Moyes do the scary things that we were worried that he might be able to do to us. So I guess that is the main positive takeaway.
Yeah, and I think we did learn a lot from this game, even if it's only repeating some of the things that we've learned before. But I think some of the takeaways are more concrete now after this game. I think it really solidified some of the stuff that we've maybe been exploring over recent weeks and developing an understanding of. So I think we got an interesting chat to have towards the end of this pod about kind of like how does that then translate to what happens from this point forward and kind of, I think we have a really clear roadmap off the back of this, really, because one of the biggest opportunities perhaps for things to change. We spoke on the preview podcast over on Patreon about different plans and different things that we could do to cause them problems with the ball and stuff that we could shake up to try and make things look a little bit different. Obviously, in the end, the plan that we got was very similar to that which we've seen in previous matches. So I think that tells us a lot about where the manager thinks the group is and what progress looks like from here. A couple of other things to pick up on before we go into sort of the main talking points, particularly looking at that first half, I think, to begin with, and why it felt so drab for a lot of it. And before we do that, Soucek scoring again, I think, is one of the really, really big highlight points. Such a Soucek goal. I think he's often sort of talked about as someone that is really, really good crashing the box and scoring headers and scoring from set pieces. But I think one of the things that gets missed or not properly captured in those conversations is that with opportunities like that, with a half yard of separation in the box and an opportunity to strike a ball, he's actually really, really good at sticking those in the back of the net, isn't he? It's a great finish. Yeah,
really good finish. The bend on it as well was something that, it was a step above what I've come to expect from Soucek. I can't remember if it was. There's always one goal I remember, and I don't know why. I think maybe I was sat in a car on a long journey, but it was either against like Watford or Norwich from the edge of the box a few seasons ago when he first arrived, and it was a similar sort of low, driven into the corner shot that was more of a striker's finish than a 6'4" central midfielder's finish. But yeah, I mean, it was all almost poetic as well, wasn't it? If he was going to score, it was going to be against David Moyes away at the last ever game in Goodison Park. So I thought it was quite nice for narrative purposes as well. But yeah, also just to really underline how inevitable, integral, important, all of those words he is to this team, has been and looks like he will continue to be.
Yeah, he continues to prove it, doesn't he? And I think we sometimes have really long conversations about how things work in possession and build up, how we can defend, how we press, and kind of development and how we go forwards as a group. And I think a lot of those conversations around the fan base often drift in the direction of, perhaps we can get a player who does more in the middle third than Tomas Soucek does, either with the ball or without the ball, being aggressive, to help us develop as a team. And then kind of every single time he comes up with these answers, which is, ultimately football's a low scoring game. And if you can put someone in your team that A, generates big chances just by his movement in the box, B, scores pretty regularly compared to most.
I was going to say he had a decent header a few minutes after the goal as well, right?
Yeah. I mean, perhaps could do a little bit better with the header chance. It's difficult, isn't it? It's right at the back post, not much of an angle to create there. But I think again, that's something, sums up what a good target he is for those kinds of things. And it's not just scoring that changes momentum in games, generating opportunities does, having a successful pressing moment does. We see that in the second half after the goal with Everton, really, and how quickly the game changed, how quickly the feeling of the game changed just off the back of a successful pressing moment and a couple of corners, and that completely changed the flow of the match. But yeah, in a low scoring sport, someone that can score, generate big chances, and actually does a really good job of stopping big chances at the other end by being so good on set pieces, by being so good on balls into the box, by being so good on cutbacks, by being so good on channel runs. Just positioning, understanding, knows where to be on the pitch, knows how to mop things up and clear the box so often. I mean, it's a bit of a cheat code, and does really set you up in a nice position in any match to be able to be competitive. And so really, really pleased for him that he gives that to us again, and no surprise, like you say, that it comes Goodison away against David Moyes, a manager that knows all too well just how good a player he is and how much of a difference maker he can be in a squad. And yeah, then onto that equaliser. We are going to talk about everything in between, but I thought I'd just start with the goals today because the game in between wasn't the most exciting one. So let's get into the into the big moments from the top. I felt really disappointed with the goal that we conceded at the end. I felt really disappointed with the last sort of 10, 15, maybe 20 minutes at the end of the match. I mean, stoppage time and the 10 minutes before it were atrocious. I think it was just absolute terrible management of the game. Before I go on too long, I'll sort of pass over to you because this is exactly the kind of thing that drives me up the wall kind of more than anything else. This is definitely a game we should have seen out, and how on earth did we manage not to?
Because everyone was shagged by the end of the game. I think, frankly, is the simple answer, right? I was really, really surprised, particularly given how willing Potter has been to use subs in previous games. I think, obviously, we had Scholes on the bench, who's been starting a lot. We had Alvarez on the bench, who's been starting a lot. And you've put players in there in Emerson and Paquetá who have not been starting a lot, so are obviously going to struggle to see out a full 90 anyway. So to leave him on the pitch for that long, especially when it was, as you say, starting to sort of not slip away because we were still in the lead, but the control of the game was starting to slip away and the momentum by around the 80th minute. And it still took another 6 minutes until the first sub was actually made. So I think ultimately that was it. And you see, I think with Todibo rolling around with cramp, Scholes going around with cramp in the previous game. So yeah, I just very surprised that we didn't see as many subs or subs made earlier, and particularly given some of the people that were left on the bench as well. Like it almost seemed nailed on that Alvarez and Scholes would appear at some point, given that they've been such strong contenders over the last few weeks.
I was stunned that Alvarez didn't get onto the pitch. I think so many players struggling towards the end of the match. You've mentioned Emerson, you've mentioned Paquetá. Paquetá, obviously the one that did come off earlier.
Yeah.
But the front two, Bowen and Kudus, last 15 or so looked knackered. I mean, Bowen particularly in a few moments sort of after the goal, when control started to drift away, just in the wrong positions. First touch is not good enough, losing the ball, too many turnovers, not contesting aerials. There were a couple of long balls that just went completely uncontested, where Branthwaite or Tarkowski can get up. Big header up the other end of the pitch. Shouldn't be possible. It should be someone jumping to contest that, make it hard to get that distance on the header. You're not going to win it, but you're going to make it more challenging for the centre-back to be so convincing with their contact. To Debo, that we really pushed it. Here he's been playing 60 and struggling beyond 60. We tried to go for the 90, and lordy me, last 5 minutes plus stoppage time. Not. It's like playing with 10 men. He was not there at all. Particularly stoppage time, bless him, just had absolutely nothing. I was going to say, he'd had a good game as well throughout. Really, I thought defensively he was really impressive. But yeah, no surprise that he tired quite so quickly. Yeah, and then also, a couple of other players. I think Soucek had worked so hard in the press, so I think maybe moving him deeper, more towards the middle of the three would have helped him in terms of less distance to cover and more impactful kind of on the edge of the box. Loads of balls coming in, so just get him closer to the centre backs where he can be a bigger impact player. Or failing that, maybe Ward-Prowse could have come off as well, because I think when teams are just, Everton were just pumping the ball into the box constantly, and he's playing in that role just in front of the centre backs. I felt like, well, what's the point in him being there? He's dropping into the box a lot, and he's not going to win aerials. He lost 2 key aerials on the edge of the box. I think the big chance at the end for Alcaraz that could have won it right at the end, and that's Ward-Prowse going up for a header and losing it on the edge of the box, and the ball going through Mavropanos' legs. And it just felt like, how have we let this get away from us in this way? Because when we scored, and for the few minutes afterwards, we looked great. And I thought, really, really good chance to convert. And that brings me to the last player I want to talk about, because I think none of it happens. None of it happens. Zero. None of it happens if Areola doesn't start doing mad stuff with the ball that completely changed the momentum in the game. We're used to him just lumping it straight away and losing possession, and the entire game spun on a moment where he decided to take a few touches under pressure, shank a clearance, not cross halfway, and they immediately won a corner after that. Followed it up with another corner, then it bounced around a bunch of the box, and Emerson had to make a huge block to stop. I think it was Harrison scoring on that occasion, and then from that moment the crowd were in it, the players were up for it, our players felt, okay, let's drop a few yards deeper and defend. I don't think any of it happens without that moment from the back where the goalkeeper just loses all control that you had in the game.
I mean, what more is there to say, right? I almost feel bad at the minute, because it feels like this is becoming a regular section of the pod that we almost need to name it. But this is meant to be a positive and objective spin, but you can't hide from the facts, right? And yeah, I think the long stuff is what we usually talk about. And again, it was poor. I think only 3 of his long balls connected with the target, about 21%, which is just not enough anyway. But when you factor in all passes and it's only 50%, that means 1 in 2 of his passes, short and long, were not going to the man. So it was like, how can you possibly expect to have any element of control if it's all going wrong right at the start of any build-up chain? So it was unfortunate. I mean, I thought in terms of shot stopping, he made a few good saves. And it's just, again, the perfect Areola sort of performance, right? Made some really good saves to keep us in touch and distance, or keep us in the game, essentially. Some really good throws. Something I've noticed really his long throw, his distribution from throw-in is bang on all the time. Hits the space really nicely, manages to start transitions that way. But obviously in a team that's looking to be less transitional and sort of battle games out by having the ball rather than sitting off and making loads of point-blank stops like he used to do under Moyes at his best, does kind of devalue him a bit, at least in the context of this team.
Yeah, I think 1 or 2 big saves, 1 or 2 better punches and claims from crosses. Again, I mean, if you were talking about the performance, probably 7 out of 10. He's had a good day. It's just that handful of moments on the ball at a key period in the match when Everton are trying to put the squeeze on. Their press hasn't been too successful, and then, like I said, it doesn't take much to change a game. We were talking about that with Soucek. It's one successful pressing moment, one big chance can change the momentum. It doesn't have to be a goal. And that successful pressing moment for them, the crowd suddenly are in it. And, I just think the whole momentum of the game changes off the back of that. So I think it's clear we have to understand that is an area where if we want to see out games with the ball, we need to be able to be more press resistant as teams chase and push really high and take more risk out of possession. And if the goalkeeper isn't going to help us do that, then we're almost possibly better focusing on, let's get all the big lads on. Let's sit with 8 in the box and see it out that way. And I think we kind of got caught in between leaving players like Paquetá and Ward-Prowse and a tired Emerson and a tiring Todibo on the pitch for as long as we did, without that base to then go and say, right, now we're going to keep 60% of the ball here, or 55% of the ball, and make it tough for you in that way, because that's not what happened. It was 75% Everton in the last 15 minutes of the match, probably without the right players on the game to help us. Probably without the right players on the pitch to help us see it out in those conditions, the ones that we actually found ourselves in. We'll take a break there, and then we'll go on and talk about kind of everything that happened in between. And I also want to particularly focus on what happened in the second half and why we were so much better in the second half before we scored the opening goal. Well, I have quite a few notes in the plan on the first half. Things to talk about, things that could have been better, things that didn't go so well, things that weren't quite right. But honestly, Cal, it was one of the most dull first halves. I've watched it 3 times. I don't really want to linger. So are you happy to kind of just give us a sort of whistle-stop tour of the main points and the things that maybe we think could have been slightly better to help us perform a little bit with honestly a bit more control? Because I felt like Everton, without creating too much, kind of had control of the vast majority of about 75-80% of the first half. I felt like Everton were very much in the driving seat and had control of the game. We just defended well and still made it tough for them.
Yeah. I mean, I think the main sort of takeaway that I had, particularly coming out of that first half, I think I'd messaged you about it, was just that the whole defence, really. I know we've highlighted Areola in that first section of the pod, but even players like Kilman to a lesser extent, but Todibo and Mavropanos, Wan-Bissaka as well, I think looked like he struggled. They just didn't seem to have that sort of composure, not even under pressure necessarily, because I don't think Everton's press was that effective.
They did press with intensity. It just wasn't. It's not the same as coming up against a Newcastle or something like that.
This is what I mean, right? And there was still moments against Newcastle, albeit few and far between, where we were able to play through and get up the pitch. And those moments just didn't happen anywhere near regularly enough. I don't think anyone at the back, but particularly the wide centre-backs, took on enough of a progressive sort of onus in terms of helping us do that. There was a few moments where I think Kilman carried up into the sort of, to create that Bowen chance on the edge of the box, and that was great.
Yeah.
But I needed to see a lot more of that, both from him and from Todibo, in a system that is what it is at the minute against an opposition like Everton. I think it really falls on them. I think Everton, as we know under Moyes, their whole game plan is to block out central areas, make it impossible to access midfielders and do anything sort of centrally. So it was always going to be a challenge to access Ward-Prowse and Soucek, Paquetá, etc. So I think, therefore, you have to sort of play through the press by having the courage to invite that pressure on and beat a man and then create those sort of numerical advantages, because otherwise everyone's got a man assigned to them and it becomes very, very difficult to play through. And I think we see that. We see Todibo forcing long balls that just never really were on. I think only 2 of his long balls actually connected from something like 14 attempts, which is just crazy. And again, speaks to that sort of lack of control. And it just felt, particularly in the first half and then the sort of final parts of that second half, again, as we've already discussed, like, we just kept throwing the ball to Everton, and that's not the sort of it's not the sort of way you want to play anyway. But I think particularly against Everton, a bit more bravery away from home. I think we showed them a little bit too much respect. It's such a cliched term, but I think I would have liked to have seen us play with a bit more sort of positivity and go, you know what, actually we're a very good bunch of players here, and we should back ourselves to be able to knock it about a bit, even in a ground as intense as this.
Yeah, I think it's obvious that the focus, was maintained in terms of, limit chances, make the game tough, make it tight, make sure that it's not going to be a blowout. It's not, they're not going to score 2 here. It's going to be a 1 goal either way game. Mm-hmm. It was clear that was the approach, that was the strategy. That's been the strategy in recent matches, and it's been effective for us in terms of, it's been massively transformative really in the number of goals that we've conceded. We had a really extended period of conceding lots of goals, a year long really, back end of the previous season, start of this season under Lopetegui. So, it was obvious the number one thing that needed to change was let's stop that and give ourselves a better platform in games. And it was clear that was what we were doing in much of the first half. Let's make sure we have a platform. Let's not be too aggressive. Let's not be let's not take too many risks. So moments where a wide centre-back probably needs to come and step up with the ball, or at least draw pressure. And then when they play to the wing back, they probably need to then advance beyond their marker to receive on the other side. Even if they can't receive that pass inside from the wing back, they can then contest a duel afterwards. So if the pass goes loose, they can then go and make a tackle or win the ball back and help us move up the pitch. That didn't really happen. If they went wide to the wide centre back, they'd stay deep, and then there's no real option for a Wan-Bissaka or for an Emerson. So lots of situations where you're then either pressed and lose the ball, or you're having to try and dribble someone under lots of pressure, and you may be dribbling one but then losing it immediately afterwards because it's, who do I pass to now? Mm-hmm. I think we'll talk about it in the second half. I think we saw much more intent to do those things and to do them right in the second half, to try and create a bit more upside with the ball. And then out of possession, I think it's difficult to find a way to talk about it without kind of falling into that sort of cliched, like you say, too much respect for Everton category or area. I think the most simple way to explain it is that Beto is very, very good in the channels. And I think if you play a back 3 or back 5 system, I think you generally have quite good coverage of the channels. And when you've got Todibo and Kilman in those positions, I felt really quite confident that, okay, if the ball gets popped over there, yeah, Beto's a really good player, but we've also got really good wide defenders that can make tackles and be aggressive and win those duels. If Beto finds himself in those spaces, different if you're playing with a 4, but with a 3, I felt like, okay, well, there's the bodies there. He's 1v3, so even if he beats one, there's still going to be Mavropanos following up behind that. He's going to have to beat them as well to create anything. You've got 3 midfielders in front too to recover. To recover in. So
Wan-Bissaka as well, even if he's caught up high, he's one thing he's very good at is even if he arrives late, he still arrives and he'll get there as a coverer and sort of force the pressure from behind.
Yeah, so I felt that maybe out of possession, I could have shown a little bit of intensity. It's not like let's go crazy and press, but we didn't really try to press very much at all in the first half. It was sort of like, Bowen and Kudus, maybe a slight bit of pressure on Tarkowski. There's a lot of room for Branthwaite to kind of just come forward with the ball unopposed for most of the first half. I think that made us a little bit too much in our shell. And I think also just in terms of mindset as well, when you're getting the ball then, if you're defending in that way, when you get the ball, it's hard in a way because you're facing long periods really of Everton knocking it around the back before them progressing without putting any pressure on the ball. So when you do win it, you sort of feel, right, let's try and get something moving quickly. And that can sometimes lead to players being a little bit too direct and forcing the ball long, and then you don't have a target man. And Tarkowski and Branthwaite are winning those two. So I think although we did a very good job of managing and not giving up big chances, I did think that we ceded too much of kind of the sort of impetus or the control of the game or whatever momentum to Everton, where Everton kind of got to play it as they probably wanted without being able to create too much because they went up against a team that was defending well against them. So it's a difficult trade-off to talk about because you still know that against Moyes, we know ourselves that if you pack in against a Moyes team, particularly one that hasn't had a long time to develop together, sometimes can be difficult for those teams to generate big chances and find ways to break you down. So I understand. It's not me saying that I don't understand, and we did a good job to keep it to 0-0. Didn't really ever feel too threatened by anything, to be honest, in the first half. Not that Everton did either. Second half, it's kind of the opposite, isn't it? I mean, where we saw Soucek in the first half really struggling to get out and support Bowen and Kudus and get some pressure on O'Brien at right centre back and kind of make it difficult for Everton to play out down that side. Because his job was more so than Paquetá. Paquetá and Ward-Prowse kind of sat in the middle, kept it tight, didn't really jump up too much at all in the first half. We did see Soucek kind of, every time it went out to O'Brien, it's like, and off he goes again. Making the 30-yard run from sort of nice compact in the 3 to kind of, I'm going to go and try and put some pressure on. It was a long way to go, wasn't it, in the first half? And he never really got there in time to really do too much that was effective in stopping Everton's build-up. Thought just one slight change in the second half, and it really helped us to be so much more effective across the whole game, was just more to move him closer to the front two when we didn't have the ball. So instead of a 5-3-2, it felt a little bit more like, coming out for the second half, a bit more like a 5-2-3, with Soucek sort of almost as a left winger in the press. That gave us that 3v3 that we saw us experience against Newcastle, right, when they were trying to build with their 3 and Isak, Murphy and Barnes were on our 3, and it was suddenly kind of tough and hard to find space and hard to find time on the ball. I felt that we created those conditions a little bit, and where we'd kind of gone from never recovering the ball in their half at all in the first half, we started recovering the ball or making duels or whatever kind of around the halfway line or just over the halfway line, which again sort of changed the feel for us when we got the ball, because now we're winning it in good positions. There's now space to maybe turn around, play backwards without losing it instantly under pressure. There's a bit more time, and now we can sort of start to show ourselves a little bit in the game.
Yeah, that's absolutely it. And I think I was just disappointed really that we didn't see it in the first half, because I just felt like it was such a, not obvious, but like I think we'd spoken previously about if you put Mikalenko under pressure, if you put O'Brien under pressure, they're going to struggle to find those sort of intricate passes into the middle third, and they're going to be likely to go long. And I think we saw that all three of our centre-backs really handled those duels with Beto very well. So I would have liked to have seen us push that more. But you're right, in the second half, it definitely did improve. I think with Soucek, you kind of just have to give him that head start. It's like if you start him a little bit further forward, he's more likely to arrive at a time where O'Brien hasn't had 6 seconds to scan the pitch and work out which the nearest free man is. So that was definitely good. And then I think also the knock-on effect, like you say, that when you do play that slightly more passive approach, it becomes a lot easier for the whole team to sort of drop into their shell, start 2 or 3 yards further back. And I think if you've got the front three leading that press, Soucek being given the license to bomb forward, as soon as you start winning that first, that second, that third turnover, all of a sudden Ward-Prowse and Paquetá go, oh, actually, we can probably have our starting position 5 yards higher as well. And then the wing-backs go, oh, sweet, let's go and join. And then the lateral centre-backs go, oh, well, let's push our defensive line higher up. All of a sudden, you're starting to control the match a little bit better out of possession. And then when you do win the ball, you've got much more options closer to you to play to. It became a lot easier to access the likes of Ward-Prowse in a way that we couldn't really do in the first half, and in a way that he desperately wants to in every game. I mean, we saw it in the Newcastle game, right? That was a really difficult, intense press, and even in those conditions, Ward-Prowse was sort of floating about trying to look to get on it all the time. But I think the gaps were a bit too extended in that first half. There felt like a bit of a disconnect between the front and sort of, well, the back, I guess, because the midfield kind of felt like the part of the back. And I think it just felt slightly more of a collective sort of effort in the first half, the second half compared to the first half, which I think, yeah, the knock-on effect was that it just became not a lot easier, because I think Everton still did a good job of making it difficult for us.
Absolutely.
But compared to where we were and where we ended up in the second half, there was a clear difference. It became a lot more bearable to watch, frankly.
Yeah, and you've given shout-outs to a few players that I wanted to mention there. Talked about Ward-Prowse, who I thought throughout the whole game, but particularly in that period in the second half before we scored, made really good decisions with the ball. Some improvement, I would say, on what we saw in the Newcastle game at times, where he found a bit of space and then sometimes without options played back and kind of set the Newcastle press and put us under pressure. Didn't feel that happened so much in this game. I thought sometimes there was there are a couple of moments that you notice them if you're watching the game and you kind of watching the games repeatedly. You start to pick out these kind of patterns, and there are moments where he kind of gets on the ball and you can see that he sort of turns around and he goes, well, the correct pass here really is to Mavropanos, right?
Yeah. And
Mavropanos in that situation is going to turn and play back to Areola, and then Areola should be able to pass out to Kilman, then we can play down the other side. But you can see in his head, he goes to play the pass that he usually would, and he goes, no, but if I go there, he's going to go back to Areola, and Areola's not going to make that next pass. Areola's probably either going to lump it or try and take a touch, and the touch isn't going to be good enough, and then there's going to be pressure by the time he gets to the next touch, and then it's going to be a real struggle for us to build out. So I'm actually going to force the ball down the side where we're being pressed, which theoretically isn't quite correct, because we should be able to circulate around to the other side. But because my goalkeeper's not good enough to do that, or is struggling at the moment to do that in this team, I'm going to play this way, and I'm going to trust that on this side of the pitch, we're going to be able to maintain the ball against pressure. And I think another thing that really helped with that is we flipped Bowen and Kudus over, and Kudus on that side with Wan-Bissaka and Todibo. Now you've got that kind of hold up and dribble in all three players. So, Todibo really good at holding players off and dribbling. Wan-Bissaka really good at holding players off and dribbling, and Kudus much the same. So when we were kind of in those situations where it's like, okay, we can't quite circulate in the way that we want to, we're going to have to force a little bit down one side. We've actually got all these players on one side of the pitch who all have an ability to handle those conditions. And I actually think that those are the three that I wanted to shout out more than anything from an in-possession perspective, because those three on that side of the pitch, although Kudus, I feel for him, because every time he gets into the final third, it just goes wrong at the moment. But everything up to that point, him, Wan-Bissaka, Todibo did a really, really good job for that sort of first 20 minutes of the second half. Gave us so much more control, handled pressure really, really well, always found ways to progress and play through or win free kicks, won a lot of their duels. I thought they all did impressively on that side of the pitch from an in-possession perspective. And then on the other side of the pitch, and we'll talk about this more on Extra Time, which is the second half of the show we do every week, patreon.com/Analytics United if you want to join us for that. First 7 days free. Emerson came back in, replacing Skulls. I thought there might be a bit of a reaction from him, and we saw it at the start of that second half, his intensity in the press, supporting Soucek on that side, loads of high turnovers, loads of middle third turnovers, really brilliant performance in the duels. I thought he was really, really, really good. As much as those guys were good in possession, I thought he was just as impressive defensively, helping us to bring that intensity to control the game better.
I was really pleased. I think. Yeah, I think it'll probably come as no surprise to anyone that we've already started looking at the summer and sort of what our squad makeup's going to look like. And I'll be completely honest, I think Emerson was one of the ones we were looking at going, well, Scarles is coming through. If there's an offer, maybe we let him go. Maybe we bring in a new left back and sort of upgrade there. And I think there's still a conversation about that. But this performance from Emerson proved that he absolutely still can be a very valuable squad member. I think it is almost even more pleasing based on how sort of reactionary the performance was. Reactionary not in a negative way, but as in like he's obviously been given this opportunity to prove himself and he's stepped up and gone, right, no, the levels are still there. When I think it could quite have easily been the case of, oh, okay, yeah, cool, no, we're going to just carry on playing Scarles now because that was shit, which it just wasn't. It was great. 75% success in both ground and aerial duels. And it's not as if there was a low volume either. I think he contested 8 ground duels and won 6 of them. Like,
I think he led the team for like interceptions, tackles, clearances. Yeah. He's right up there for all of those metrics. I think his progressive work was, I think he might have led the team there as well. I think he was right in the top 3 for progressive passes, carries as well. I mean, did just an absolutely, I mean, it was the best way to say this is probably his best performance this season. Might be his best performance in a very long time, frankly, in a West Ham shirt. It was absolutely magnificent.
Yeah, really good. And I think what's also really pleasing from a moving forward perspective, and I think we're going to go on and talk about what we've learned, but one of the things that really has pleased me is that performance now, I think, will hopefully give Potter the freedom to sort of think about a return to a back 4 if he thinks that's right. Whereas I think at the minute he's maybe felt like, oh, we need to have 3 centre-backs in there because we've got to protect Scarles a little bit and he's the wing-back option at the moment, and we need to sort of stem the flow of goals that we've been conceding, and therefore this is the shape we have to go with. But I think that level of performance, like we say, from Emerson, along with the performances of Todibo, Kilman, Wan-Bissaka, etc., there is a new option there. So I think we could potentially see us move away from the 3-5-2, 5-3-2, whatever you want to call it, which at times has felt like a bit of a marriage of convenience. It's just kind of these are the only players I've got fit, and this is the only way I can really put them all onto the pitch without us really opening up some issues. So yeah, really pleased with that.
Yeah, and for me, finally on that, the best evidence supporting why you promote youth players who are pushing, because it's not just about how they perform as individuals when they come into team, helping their development, giving belief to the other academy players, energizing those players to help push at their level to try and get into senior training. The ones that are training with the senior team feel, okay, I can actually, there's a spot here for me. If I play really well this week in training, I might actually, nab myself a spot on the bench or in the team. I might get on in a game and be able to show what I can do. I think actually for the senior players, it's great, because once a manager comes in and does that and goes, well, no, if someone plays really well in training and convinces, and you haven't really been performing at your best level for a couple of months, if I make that, I'm actually happy to make that swap. And then that brings that level of competition, that intensity in training, where senior players suddenly think, and this is not a criticism really of where players are. I think, it's not a sense that players just get demotivated and don't care. I just think that you do in any role, in any situation, just in the day-to-day, if you're doing the same thing over and over and over again, you start to do a little bit on autopilot, and it just starts to happen without you necessarily thinking and without you necessarily having to kind of G yourself up for it. And then in some ways, sometimes the quality can just come down. I love cooking. I love cooking for us. I have a great time cooking dinners here when I can, when I'm not absolutely bucket with work as we've been over the last 2 weeks. Very excited to share what that's about, and you'll hear about that on the next pod. In fact, you'll hear from us. I mean, you'll hear from us before that. You should be able to hear over on social media what's going on, which is super exciting, but very busy. Yeah, I think sometimes the first time I make a meal, the second time I make a meal, the third time I make a meal, it's like I improve it, make little tweaks, it gets better. And then when I'm on to the 27th and 30th time, I'm just like, oh, whatever the quickest way to do it, I'm just going to do it the quickest way.
Missing out ingredients.
I'm skipping ingredients. I'm thinking, oh, that's a load of ag. Shall I pop down the shop and get that herb that I want to make it that little bit better? Or shall I just,
Shall I just Google substitute?
Yeah. Or just, a few cracks of pepper and leave it at that. That'll do the job. And I don't think that's, and that's, again, it's not a criticism. I just think it's entirely natural. And because sort of Cresswell's kind of faded into the background as an option at left back, and there wasn't really an obvious idea of, who was going to be pressing or pushing in that position. Obviously, Scholes was there, but he hadn't played for a long time. Hadn't really been involved too much at all since that debut in Europa League or Europa Conference League. Can't remember which competition it was in, against FCSB. Great performance. I think sometimes you're just whipping together the meal that that you can make, and just doing what you do, and it's fine. And I think for a long time Emerson had been a good, a solid performer for the first team, but a player that was, to me, always obviously capable of a little bit more. It could always give you something extra, and just wasn't putting those extra ingredients in to give you that little bit extra every single week. And we got that back. And that's a really, really good thing for us at left back, but actually across the whole squad, because if you're mapping that across other players who know they're being pushed by, a Freddie Potts coming back into the group in the summer, a Lewis Orford, Callum Marshall's had a really good line, George Earthy's coming up to real good pace now at Bristol City's performed really well in recent weeks. If these guys are going to come back in and be part of training over the summer, you've got senior players that know, okay, well, we saw what happened with Scholes and Emerson. I've got to really be on it now and give my best in every single day. And that competition's excellent for the whole group. So really looking forward to see, hopefully, this kind of micro thing that we've seen at left back expand across the rest of the group and help push those levels every single week as much as possible. So on to the final section of the pod, which every week has become this kind of what did we learn feature. What are the main takeaways? What translates to next week? What are the things that we can take away from this and understand better about the group and our team going forward? I mean, I think the top line stuff is stuff that we've kind of already broken into across the pod, which is that whatever you think about the group, whatever we each individually think about what the group is capable of, how we should play, how we could play, etc. It's clear that the manager at the moment is prioritizing stemming the bleeding, stopping the goals going in, and helping us to kind of be more competitive in every single match and have a platform to be competitive in every single match, which I've been banging on about. It is probably quite boring. It is, I mean, even for me, someone who can kind of really enjoy little pressing things and little, basically just small out of possession things, can really get a lot of enjoyment out of watching different tweaks and seeing how they go. Even for me at the moment, I think I'm watching some of the games and thinking, oh, God, this is tough to get much out of. It's still probably the right thing for our group where we are at the moment, isn't it?
It makes sense. I think you come in as a new manager midway through the season in a period where there's a lot of fixture congestion, you've got players injured, you've not got the rub of the green, frankly. And the reason you've been brought in is because, as you say, for the best part of a year, the side has been shipping goals, and our previous attempt to change that and remedy it has failed, and now we find ourselves in a relegation battle mid-season. I don't know what else you could have done coming in there that wouldn't have been absolutely batshit than try to stop conceding goals and sort of, raise the baseline, raise the floor of the team, because I think it's obvious on paper for any manager really looking at the quality of players that we've got in the squad that we should be able to score goals when we create chances, because we've got the likes of Bowen, not Kudus at the moment, but obviously still a player who has proven how high quality a player he is. So the logic is that if you raise that floor, if you stop shipping 3 goals a game and only concede 1, or ideally concede none, then in those moments, you back your players to convert them. And I think it's entirely logical. I think, as you say, it doesn't necessarily make for the most exciting games of football, but it's better than losing. Frankly, is the completely simple way to put it. And I think it's easy now to sort of be a bit more frustrated, I guess, and a bit more tired with it because of the way the table's shaped up now, and it does look, for all intents and purposes, that we are safe. But at least when Potter came in, there was a very real risk that we still were involved in that battle, I think. Because
just about, yeah.
And it would have been irresponsible to not sort of try and just drag points out of games, which I think we did well. And yeah, it's funny really, because I think everyone would have assumed when Potter came in that I would be the one that was really excited because we're going to pivot towards a super possession-based, intricate game of football. And what's actually happened is that Potter's come in and done some of the filthiest out of possession defensive performances that we've seen. And Jack's actually the one that's been super pleased by it all. But yeah, I think it does make sense, and I think we've still seen glimmer. It's not as if he's just come in and said, right, we're a low block counter-attacking team now. We've still seen intent. Like that Villa game was super impressive in terms of the intensity, in terms of the buy-in off the rip, basically, from the players.
And Leicester was a completely different kind of performance against a weaker team in the Premier League than we've seen for a long time. I think, it's the first time really I've seen us sort of sweep aside a team that's just weaker than us in terms of the quality of player that they're able to put on the pitch without ever making it into a game, without ever opening up an opportunity for them to do anything in the match, which I think is real progress. I think more than almost any other thing we've seen so far under Potter, I think that was the biggest moment where it's like, oh, okay, that's something that we've needed to do for a long time, to show an ability to do that. And the fact that he's been able to do that, yes, of course, I understand it's Leicester, but it's not about winning. We're not pleased with the win there. What we were pleased with was the way in which we approached winning. We could have won by more. We could have approached it differently and could have won the game by 3, by 4. I think Leicester was so poor on the day that we could easily have done kind of what we did against Ipswich earlier in the season. But I don't want to see that in those games. I want to see that kind of performance where it's like, this isn't a game where we have to really go and exert ourselves and go and like push and open counters and have that kind of match against this sort of team. Can just go and play that way, control it completely, and just win without ever really being stressed at any point, without having to stretch ourselves. I think we're learning that out of possession, and I think we're having to work a lot harder on that out of possession. How can we create a baseline in any game in the Premier League where we know we can be competitive, where we know we're not going to get beaten comfortably? And that's a longer, tougher process at the moment for this group than I think we probably expected. I think we probably hope that maybe, okay, you set that baseline, you do it for a couple of weeks, okay, now everything's better, and now you can start to like, okay, well, there's not much of the season left, we're not going to get relegated, let's like start playing Luis Guilherme and start like getting all these guys that haven't been playing as much into the team and see if we can play, be a bit more aggressive and try and be a bit more creative with the ball. But actually, I think one of the things that gets missed when we talk about that is that the low risk strategy that we're employing right now, it's a really nice kind of slow curve to developing more meaningful and more developed and less breakable, less brittle belief in the group. And I think something that's been one of our big problems over the course of the first half of the season, definitely, and the last half of David Moyes' final season with us, is that we might have a good couple of games, we might have a good couple of results, or just one really good result and one really good game, and the belief goes right up and everyone feels like, okay, now we can go and push, we're ready to go and try and put together a string of results that gets us back into contention for Europe or whatever it is. And then it was often immediately followed by sort of, conceding maybe 2 or 3 goals in the first half of a game, massive blowout in the first half. Often did manage to try and find a way to maybe be a bit more competitive in the second half of a game. That was definitely the case under Lopetegui. There are loads of situations like, right, it's 2 or 3-0 early, and then we've kind of managed the second half maybe a little bit better, or tried to push a little bit better, made changes that have helped us. But I think it's really important for this group of players to to completely lose that sense of going out every other week or one in every 3 weeks and having that here we go again feeling after 30 minutes where you're 2-0 down. And it's like, we're never going to do this. As a group where we are under the managers that we've had, we're just never going to be able to push to be at the level that we want. And by having this process over the back end of this season, which might be a bit excruciating as a fan, or as a neutral watching West Ham games, it probably puts us in a position going into the summer where the players feel like, okay, didn't really concede any goals in the back end of that season. Always were in games. Didn't matter who it was against. We were always in it. Always presented a challenge for any team. Always made it tough. Now, of course, we need to work on how we can be better with the ball and cause more problems. But we've got these players coming into the group. You know, they're going to be players signed over the summer that are going to help us to do that. There's been a bit of change. There've been a few players leaving. We've now got a whole summer to work together on how we want to do that. What's our way? What's our identity as a team? How are we going to cause problems for teams with the way that we play? And we've got that foundation behind us, which we're building on top of. There isn't going to be that sense of, okay, we're trying this, but, you know, we finished the season with that shocking 3-0, 4-0 loss against someone where we really, you know, went for it. I think it's best maybe to get the players in that you know you can do it with first. So you've got a foundation to build on, and you're not going to create that situation with players where they're going into, you know, maybe match week 2 in the Premier League and it does go wrong and they think, well, what's the point? We're just back where we were. It's just we're still in this never-ending cycle of maybe having a good couple of weeks and then just getting completely blown away in the first half hour against someone that knows how to deal with us.
Yeah, I think that's it. And I think the way I'm kind of looking at the minute, and yeah, I agree. I think in the summer, change will come, and I think it will take us probably closer to what maybe some fans are yearning for already. But ultimately, I think the system we played under Lopetegui was high risk, high reward, but we never really got much of the reward. And I think the way we're approaching
high risk, low reward.
Yeah, exactly. But I think Potter's kind of come in and gone, well, we can reduce the risk factor, but ultimately it's football, right? The reward is 3 points at the end of every game. It doesn't really, everyone still leaves with 3 points if you win. Okay, like maybe your goal difference changes a lot, but we're not really ever going to be in a position, I don't think, where goal difference, at least this season, matters that much to us, realistically, does it? It's not, we're not going to win or lose a league title on goal difference at West Ham. That's not going to happen. And I think the high risk, high reward strategies that those top teams play are kind of mitigated by the fact that they've got a £75 million centre back or something like that. You can afford to do that. And I think with the squad where it is at the minute, where obviously we've kind of got a few square pegs in round holes probably in terms of what Potter actually wants to do on the pitch, it makes complete sense. And I think as well, as you've said, sort of putting the building blocks in place for what Potter presumably will want us to do in terms of having more of the ball, controlling games, defending with the ball. We're putting the foundations in place at the back, and I think the back probably won't change all that much next season. Wan-Bissaka is going to be a key member still. Todibo, now that he's being introduced and putting in good performances regularly, is going to be an integral member of that defence. Max Kilman's going to be at the heart of the defence. Scarles will probably be involved. Emerson might be involved. We may or may not go and get a new centre-back. I think there's been links to Connie de Winter, but again, if that's someone that comes in, it's someone that raises the floor because they'll see him and go, oh, that's someone who is very good with the ball at his feet, and maybe that's been one issue that we've had at the back. We've not been quite as comfortable as we need to be. And if you replace the goalkeeper, as we've already said, players are sort of looking to not go backwards because they don't feel like they can. As if you bring in a new goalkeeper, they're going to go, oh shit, okay, sweet, I can start doing all of those things that we couldn't do.
Exactly. It's more about what we do with the ball, and you've not already trained into players.
Yeah.
Oh, this is always going wrong when we've done this previously, and they don't want to do it when they've got the right pieces next to them. You're training it into players when they've got the right pieces, so that their first reactions are, well, that works really well and I want to do that again. They haven't got that doubt already going into setting all the plans for next season. I think that is something that's really hard to see when you're viewing the game week to week, and your interaction with, and that's what it is as a fan. Like for us, our interaction with West Ham is we see them at the weekend in a game. We don't see them day in, day out when they're going into training, running the same drills with the same players, learning as a group, developing relationships as a group. And I think that, particularly for a manager, you want those instincts to come with real positive reactions, with real positive feelings. You want players to be rewarded for doing the right things that you want them to do from an in-possession perspective particularly. And I think if you set that all up this season and they consistently got the wrong outcomes, you'd be in a bad place going into the summer then asking them to do all the same things again, because there's that little bit of doubt in the back of everyone's minds, which you won't have if you've got the right players to help you do it. And I think the base for what we do with the ball will very likely be quite different next season. Goalkeeper, possibly different. I think also in midfield, there'll be differences in there. I think there will be a player recruited in there that might help us be a little bit more effective and progressive when we're trying to build out from the centre-backs, receiving off the centre-backs and stuff. So just those reactions in that backline unit of how it goes, it's about training those in the right way and giving them the right responses, getting the right feedback when those things happen. I also think, and the last thing I want to talk about, very final note, is that a little bit unfortunate with injuries, because I think the way in which we would be able to push with a couple of players that are out would be different. You know, if Somerville was available, the way in which this system can push and cause different issues is very different to what it is with the players that we have available. The fact that Paquetá went as well for a short period has hindered that too. And then injuries and lack of form up front. You know, if Antonio's there, the way that you can stretch in the second half of a game, very different. If Ferguson was up to full fitness and actually performing, because he hasn't performed very well, then the way that you can stretch with the ball is a little bit different. If Fulkrug's there, again, different problems that you can cause teams. Without those three, without Somerville, you're very constricted in terms of how this system can actually create issues for teams. And also what actually you could do if you change the shape and try to be more aggressive with the ball, because you'd be missing loads of key pieces to help you realise that sort of vision. Thank you so much, Cal. I know you've got to go. You've only got a couple of minutes.
All good.
I have one last question to ask you.
Go for it.
How much did you enjoy that Beto penalty shout?
I got to respect it, man. I got to respect it. As someone who did quite a lot of amateur dramatics when I was younger, I see a fellow actor out there, and I respect it. But it was hilarious.
Possibly one of the highlights of the season for me. Well done, ref. Is all I have to say about that. Incredible. But yeah, thank you for listening. Thanks again, Cal. And we will catch you. It won't be next week because there's no game, but we'll be back after that to talk about. Do you know who we have next? I don't even know who we have next.
Was it Wolves Tuesday night, Jobby?
That sounds right. So we'll be back to talk about that. In fact, we'll be on a double, won't we? So it'll either be a late pod from us that week, or we'll have a double. An exciting return with 2 games to discuss, hopefully.
Oh, yes.
Afterwards. So, yeah, enjoy the little break. Hope your international team wins, whoever it is. And your national team wins, whoever it is. And, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks.